Hello there, Singapore.
Hi, Drayton. How are you?
I'm very old.
Nice to meet
I'm
you.
very worried. You've asked me so many difficult questions. I almost decided to give up yesterday.
Oh,
I've
okay.
made notes. I never make notes. Normally,
Oh,
I just
okay.
make it up as I go along.
Okay. Oh, would you mind letting me record as well, if that's okay? Yeah, I think Kelly needs to give me permission or something, like permission to record.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course you can. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Kelly needs to give me permission to record it.
Yeah, of course. Record it as much as you like. If you see anything
Okay.
else you'd like to record that's better, record that as well.
Yeah. Thank you. I think you need to give me permission on your end to record it.
On air? Yes, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah.
You have full permission to record it.
Yeah.
Send it
I
to
mean,
all your
like,
friends.
thank you. Yeah, I
Send
mean,
it to
like
your enemy.
thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, like in your Zoom settings or something. I think there's a button to give me.
Kelly, he's asking me about that I have to give permission to record it in the Zoom. She understands what you're talking about. I don't.
So sorry about that.
No, that's all right.
How do we do that? There we go.
Oh, blimey.
Thank you so much.
Is that working?
Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, it's working. Thank you so much, Kelly. Thanks, Drayton.
Okay, don't thank me till afterwards.
Awesome. Yeah, I hope my questions are okay with you.
Yeah, well, it's a bit late for me to complain, isn't it? I've got them all written down. And if you
cool.
read them out, I will reply to them.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, if you're okay, then I'll just start. Yeah, so like after reading your books and joining us, Drayton, yeah, and then watching your videos, especially the one on how to write and persuade better.
Yeah.
I gotta say, it really helped to build my foundation when I was just starting. So I was just curious, like, who would you say gave you the best advice on copywriting or marketing when you were new at it, and what did he or she say?
This is a very, very interesting question. And the reason it's an interesting question is to do with the way things were when I got involved. That you have to appreciate not only that I'm extremely old, but that I'm so old that when I came into the advertising business, the word marketing was not used. Yeah.
Okay.
The word marketing, I've done some research. The actual word marketing was not used. It was first used in 1904. Okay. But when I came into advertising, you never heard the word. You hardly ever heard it. And the first, not my fourth advertising job was the first job where there was talk about marketing, and that would be in 1971.
Oh,
so
okay.
So I wasn't inspired by marketing people. When you say, was I inspired by I wasn't inspired because there weren't any. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Nor was I inspired by advertising people because I didn't know any. And it's a very, very interesting question because I had to stop and think, what did inspire me, if anything? And the answer is, I was inspired by asking questions.
Oh, okay.
And the first thing that influenced me, not just in my career, but in everything, was the fact that my first job, I worked out, I got a scholarship to university, and I walked out after a year because I was bored and I wanted to be a writer.
Okay.
And I got a job as a writer on a magazine called Cotton. And at that time, in Manchester, near where I was brought up, the cotton industry was very big until it was really destroyed by competition, mostly from Pakistan.
Okay.
And I worked for this magazine for about 14 months, I think. And the man that employed me, a chap called Ken Everington.
Okay.
And I'm very curious.
Yep.
So, Dr. Johnson, who's been a great inspiration to me, the 18th century writer, the man who created the first great English dictionary, said somewhere that curiosity is not the mode of conversation amongst gentlemen.
Oh.
And in one of my books, I pointed out that it may not be the mode of conversation among gentlemen, but it is amongst copywriters. David Ogilvy actually listed 5 qualities that he thought a good copywriter could have. And one was insatiable curiosity. And I noticed that my boss had a degree in philosophy.
Oh, okay.
And I said, what's philosophy? And he said, read this book. And the book was Bertrand Russell's History of Western Philosophy. That book may well have had more influence on me than anything I ever read about advertising or marketing, because it taught me to think. So, and most of my thinking has not been governed by advertising and marketing. So that was the first piece of advice I was given that helped me read this book. And the next piece of advice that was given to me was by a friend called Sandy Ratcliffe, who was came from a very good family, and he was a member of what was known as the Princess Margaret Circle. So he was very well connected. And he said to me one day, you should go into advertising. I knew nothing about advertising. So number one, somebody told me how to think, or gave me a link to find out how to think. Number two, somebody told me what I should try and do. And so I went to the Manchester Public Library and looked for books on advertising. There were only 2. One was rubbish. The other one was called Copy, the Core of Advertising. And I read all this book. I just sat down and read it. And I thought, wow, I'd love to do that. And the reason I was because I'd always been interested in persuading people. I originally wanted to be a lawyer. And this was like commercial advocacy, persuading people to do one thing rather than another. So I thought, I want to get a job in advertising.
I'm glad you didn't become a lawyer.
I probably have gone to jail.
No.
Anyhow, so I then took a course, an evening course. And at that time, I was very poor. My family were not poor, but my father did not believe in giving me everything. All he did was he bought me a very small house, an interesting house. It was the only house in the row that I was on that had a bath.
Oh, okay.
so people used to come and bother. People used to ask if they could use our bath.
Oh, okay.
So it was very, I had nothing. I had a wife. I discovered sex a few years earlier, and no money. A wife, a child, and no money. And so eventually I went to see a man who was the secretary of the Advertising Association. I forget what it was called exactly, in Manchester.
Okay.
To see if he could give me some advice. And he was extremely conservative. And the first thing I've learned about persuasion, or maybe not the first, but one of the first, was to talk to people about things they were interested in and agree with them.
Okay.
So I discovered I realized he was very conservative and right-wing. So as soon as I could, I made some very conservative and right-wing statements, from which he speedily concluded that I was very intelligent. And he arranged to give me an interview.
Okay.
In Liverpool, which is actually where I was born, but it was quite a long way away from Manchester. I got an interview with the head of an agency.
Okay.
And he said, we don't employ copywriters. You have to go through the ranks. And I said, well, I'm desperate, blah, blah, blah. I need a job. I need money, da-da-da. And so he asked me he said, why should I give you a job? He said, we don't. What makes you think you can be a copywriter? So I said, well, there are 3 reasons. And he said, he said, what are they? And I said, well, first of all, I think that a good copywriter must understand people. He said, you're very young. Why do you think you understand people? And I said, because I was brought up in a pub. And in a pub, you meet all sorts of different people and you understand people. You know what makes them tick. And I said, And I said, furthermore, the pub was divided between 2 types of people, very rich people and poor people. And I used to speak to both of them. So I understood, so that's interesting. And then he said, okay, what other reason can you give me why I should give you a job? And I said, because I think a copywriter should know a great deal about a great many things. So he should have a great fund of knowledge. He said, that's true. He said, can you tell me what is the difference between a 2-stroke engine and a 4-stroke engine? Well, this was a miracle. I cannot drive. I could not drive. I still cannot drive. But when I was at school, I'd learnt the difference between a 2-stroke engine and a 4-stroke engine. I told him, and he said, And he said, now can you tell me the name of the Plymouth Evening newspaper? I had no idea. But he asked me 10 questions, and he said, yes, you do have a good fund of knowledge.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think what other reason he gave me that a copywriter required to succeed. But whatever it was, I knew the answer. And he said, all right, I'll give you a job. He said, how much money are you getting paid at this magazine you're? So I said, well, after I pay tax, I get £6.13 a week.
Okay.
And he said, all right, we'll give you £6.13 a week. And I said, but I have to come from the other side of Manchester and catch the train here into Manchester, and then from Manchester to here to Liverpool every day. So he thought, I said, that I can't afford it. He said, all right, we'll give you £7. another £2. this gives you some idea about what's happened to the value of money.
Yeah,
In
agree.
London, you can pay £7 for one drink now, never mind for a week's wages.
Wow.
So I got
Okay.
that. I got that job,
Yeah.
and I think I was lucky because the agency I went to, which was called SC Peacock, they had a library of books.
Okay.
And so I read all the books the books about advertising.
Oh,
And
so they actually had a library.
Yeah, so I had a library. Hardly any agencies have libraries. So I think they all think that ignorance is the route to success. And so do a lot of people in advertising. So I read all the books in the library, and I was very fortunate because nowadays there tends to be great specialization. You, for instance, specialize in charity.
Yeah.
I have never specialized in anything.
Okay.
The first 3 jobs I got were very different. One was to sell a restaurant. One was to sell a kind of seed cleaning machinery, which even I can't remember.
Oh.
Something to do with cotton. The third was to sell sausages. But it wasn't to sell sausages to people who would eat sausages. It was called a salesman's organizer, and it was a thing that a salesman would take around with him to remind him what to say to the shopkeeper when he was selling the sausages.
Oh, okay.
So I wasn't told to specialize. I was expected to be able to do everything. This was very, very good for me.
Yeah.
Very, very
Agree.
good for me.
Yeah.
So that was tremendously valuable. But you asked what advice was most valuable to me. Having told you the story of my early life. I actually haven't told you the story. If I told you the story of my early life, you would be horrified. I've written an autobiography which talks about that, and I realised I've not been very respectable. But anyhow, you asked me what made the most difference. And so I've told you a couple of things. Somebody who taught me revealed how to think. Somebody who told me to get into advertising. And the thing that I think made the most difference in my first 3 or 4 years in advertising was unquestionably in my 4th job, which was with an agency in London, which was taken over by Leo Burnett. And Leo Burnett sent over 2 of his people to teach us how to do presentation.
Okay.
And one of those people was a man called Draper Daniels.
Okay.
And Draper Daniels was actually the chief basis upon which the advertising television series Mad Men was based. Don Draper was based on Draper Daniels. I never knew, but nobody. Well, that series hadn't been made, and I only realised this many years later. But he and his colleagues sat and explained how they sold advertising.
Oh, okay.
That's very important. The chairman of IBM in the 1950s and the 1960s said once that nothing happens in business until something gets sold. Nothing happens in advertising until something gets sold either. So learning from this man and his colleague, but he was the one I remember, how they sold a campaign to a big bank in Chicago was a revelation to me to some extent. and it coloured all my actions ever since. Nothing does happen until you sell it.
Yeah,
So
that's
I was quite good at selling to start with,
true.
because my father was a very good salesman, and so was my grandfather. So it's all very well to have a brilliant idea, but if you can't sell it, you might just as well never have had it. If it doesn't appear, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So that was very, very valuable to me. Very, very valuable.
Agree.
I think the other people who inspired me, I've not been inspired by advertising people to that extent.
Okay.
David Ogilvy, with whom I worked, inspired me. But by then I was doing very well. I was inspired later on by a number of American advertising men I met, and particularly by a man called Gene Schwartz, who now is very, very famous. He's not, unfortunately, he's no longer alive. But not only he offered me a job, which I turned down because I didn't think I was good enough. He introduced me to modern art.
Okay.
He was very kind to me, and I liked him a lot. But he had a big influence on me. He taught me an awful lot about what you have to do to succeed, and not surprisingly, what you have to do to succeed is hard work. And he did a speech somewhere to one of his clients, which I have a recording of. And he said, when I've read a book, he said, I know more about it than the author. And I know that this is almost certainly true because from my own experience, I don't know how many books I've written, maybe 7, or I don't know. But I never read them after I've written them. But somebody who has to sell them probably does. So I learned a lot from him. But other people inspired me. In my first job in London, I went to see a man called Lenny Bruce, whom I'm sure you've never heard of.
Yeah.
Lenny Bruce was the first of the utterly outrageous comedians of the 1960s. All the outrageous comedians since then, you can trace them back to Lenny Bruce. He just did things and said things that nobody else had ever said before. And I always remember going to see him at a club in London called The Establishment, which was owned by a very funny comedian, no longer with us, and another guy who spent all his money. And, a comedian called Cook, very, very funny man.
Cook, okay.
Yeah, and Lenny Bruce got up, and the first thing I noticed was he was fantastically well dressed. And I don't get, as you can see, I'm not fantastically dressed anymore. But when I was doing presentations, I always made a point of looking very, very smart. And he had this beautiful black jacket, and it had a narrow collar, and you could see there was a bright red silk lining under it. So he made an impression. And when I started doing speaking, I always tried to make sure I would make an impression somehow. And then he stood up, and the first thing he said was, he just stood up and he said, "Fuck." And then he looked at everyone and he said, "Are you all happy now?" He understood that people had gone there to see him be outrageous. And so that taught me 2 lessons. Number one, surprise people. Surprise is the key. Relevant surprise is the key to all great communication. You say something that is highly relevant, but it's so surprising that it sticks in the mind. Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
And this man inspired me, and I thought, my God, I'd like to do something like that. I remember going back home, I couldn't sleep for thinking about what this man had done. And so much later on, I did a lot of presentations. I think I've spoken, I worked it out once, I've spoken in 65 countries, and God knows how many cities. When I started, I used to be ill because I was so frightened.
Okay.
But I understand quite a few. I understand Churchill used to be quite ill. Quite a few of the good speakers are. David Ogilvy, with whom I worked for quite 8 years or something, and knew for longer, was always terrified when he had to do a talk, even to his own people. If you're not worried, if you're not frightened, you won't try hard.
Yeah.
When you get a job, I don't know about you, but whenever I get a job, unless it's something that I've done many times before, I'm filled with despair and panic, and I think, I don't know the answer to this. I'm worried, I'm frightened. I may be worried for a couple of days as to whether, if you don't care, you won't do well.
Yeah, that's true.
Advertising and copy, any kind of copy, is the conveyance of emotion, and that emotion comes from you, and the emotion is your desire to do a good job, to do it well. So that's strange enough how Lenny Bruce inspired me. So, and many the people who've inspired me have not been. They just haven't, for the most part. No, they haven't been. I think. So yeah, that's. I think I could probably bore the pants off you talking about.
No worries.
But we only have a day or so.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting.
So
yeah, very interesting.
You had another question, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. So like I always highly recommend your Common Sense Direct and Digital Marketing book as recommended reading to anyone starting as a copywriter or even a marketer. And even if they're business owners and I care about that friend who's a business owner, what would be the next book or course you would recommend to someone new?
This was a rather tricky question because I actually recommend the book you just mentioned. Why do I recommend? Why do I recommend that book? Actually, you can see behind your head in the picture there. I can see the book. Yeah. Well, I recommend the book. I think because it sums up all the knowledge I gained from other people. David Ogilvy said after he first read it, said this book contains the knowledge of a lifetime. I think it's one of the reasons why he wants to buy my agency. And so it's not me that's special. It's the study that I did that is special. I'm profoundly aware of my ignorance, and that's a pretty good way to start if you want to write a book. Doesn't matter what it's about. So that book sums up everything I'd found out, read or heard over the time that I'd been in the business. and it's now, I think next year would be the 40th year that it's since it came out, and it still sells.
Yeah,
It must be pretty good.
it is.
Curiously enough, you know, there were 2 Chinese editions and 2 different dialects. Also, I don't know what they were, but there were 2. But it was out in 17 languages. It's much bigger now than it was. But when it came out, it was a slim volume. But now it's the sort of thing. It's very good for propping up tables or keeping doors open, hitting people with. But it contains pretty much everything you want to know. I'll come to other books that I recommend in a minute, but most of them are books that I stole from or learned from. Because I think you should read a lot of books. I lost count of the number of books I've read. Before I got a job in advertising, I did something that, as far as I can make out, plenty of people who are in advertising don't bother to do, never mind before they've got a job. I read every single book I could get a hold of about advertising. There were books going back, there were books going back to the 1900s. So before I even got a job, I knew a hell of a lot about, more than most people know about advertising. Because well prepared is very important. So I stole from all these books. But I think the other book that I'd recommend, I have to recommend one of my own books, and the only reason I recommend it is because Bob Bly, whom I've only met once, who's written over 100 books, and whom I didn't really know. I just met him briefly, and he wrote to me one day, and he said, I read all the books on the subject of writing letters. He said, and yours is the best. And since I didn't believe him, he then repeated it later on. So it must be a fairly good book. I actually think it's better than Common Sense. Certainly better if you want to learn about copywriting. But it does include a great deal about marketing itself. And it's shorter than the other book. And it does cover now stuff about emails and so on. People seem to imagine that the principles of writing one thing are different to the principles of writing another thing. They're not. They're the same. The principle of writing everything is, first of all, get people to start reading, and secondly, make sure they keep bloody well reading until they reach the end. So try and get them to tell their friends how wonderful it is. But I was very impressed by the Robert Collier letter book, which was written in the 1950s. And I was extremely flattered when a copywriter said to me that my book was better. I don't say it's better. It's much more recent, and it covers a different. It's a differently. The Robert Collier letter book is great because it's about selling all sorts of things. But it's only about letters. I'm not saying that the principles of writing letters are that different, but I mean, I've written quite a few commercials. The overriding principle is the same, but it's not. There are certain technical, depending on what medium if you're creating a poster, it's not the same thing, although the same principles apply as if you're writing an ad.
Cool.
I think that's all I can tell you about books. Or is just read a lot. I mean, there's one thing I noticed after a while in advertising, and that was there weren't very many old copywriters.
Yeah.
I noticed there weren't very many. There aren't very many old advertising men, and the reason they're not very old is because they didn't study when they were young.
Oh, okay.
What you learn when you're young will keep you in business when you're old.
Yeah,
I'm
agree,
what, 85,
yeah.
and I still write copy every day, pretty much, every day, but every day of the week. And it's because I've never stopped trying to learn.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's all I can say to be about books.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'll be sure to get a couple of copies of your book on how to write letters.
I think you'd find. I know, you and I have never met, but obviously we've exchanged messages.
Yep.
And I think you would find it useful. I'd be surprised if you didn't find it useful, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure I will. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. So how do you grow to get to be so good at copywriting and marketing? Were there like any goals you set for yourself?
I love it when somebody says, "How did you get to be so good?" There is a problem with that, and that is that I don't think I'm so good. I just think it's not that I'm good; it's just that I'm better than a lot of other people, and that's because they're so bad. So let me have a look at my notes.
Sure.
Well, I think the first reason is insatiable curiosity, study.
Okay.
As I touched upon before, the fact that I started studying before I even got a job, but I've never stopped. Every day I go on the internet and I read. I spend half my day, I guess, thinking about working. And the other half of my day thinking.
Okay.
And the great thing about thinking is you don't have to think about thinking. I go for a lot of walks. I walk a lot. And when I walk, I think. And when I walk, I watch people.
Okay.
I used to do a trick in presentations. I would ask people what do they all think is the world's favorite sport, most popular sport, and people, football, blah blah blah, tennis, blah blah blah. I'll say no. The world's favorite sport is watching people.
True.
Because people are not only where the money comes from, people are where the ideas come from. And as the proper study of mankind is man. This was written by the great poet Alexander Pope.
Okay.
And I would say that one of the reasons why I am pretty good is because I don't just read about marketing. I think it's a very, very narrow subject. My reading has been hugely conditioned by great writers. When I got my first big job, potentially big job in Manchester, what happened was I had this job in Liverpool, and I was a rebel, and I was told off for not wearing the right kind of clothes and saying rude things about the vice chairman. And I thought, right, screw this, I'm going to get a job and I'll try and get a job in Manchester, which is near where I live. So I wrote 5 letters to 5 agencies, and 3 of them offered me an interview. And I got a job at the second interview, which was with an agency run by a man who owned a restaurant. I think he knew more about restaurants than he did about advertising. And after I'd been there for a bit, I had a stroke of luck. And he called me in and he said, he said, well, I'm thinking of starting a public relations division.
Okay.
And he said, well, you seem a likely lad. How would you like to do it? So I said, well, I'm not really interested. Mr. Knowles, his name was Bert Knowles. He said, why is that? And I said, well, advertising is to public relations as lying is to perjury. And he said, well, it's either that or the sack.
Okay.
So I said, Mr. Knowles, I'm your man. So I did public relations for a bit. So one of the great things that's been to help me a lot, have I been any good, is that I've had to do an amazing number of things, some of which you wouldn't like to do, like going broke, like selling franchises, like selling fake Chagall paintings in Australia. There's some of the things I've done I don't even like to talk about. But trying to sell Scotch whiskey for investment on the telephone, I'm terrified of the telephone. I hate it. I had to do that for a bit. So I had to do all sorts of things I didn't want to do. That makes you very good. Yeah. You do things you don't want to do.
Yeah.
You learn that you can do more than you thought you could, even if you were terrified. So I did this public relations job for a bit. The first part was to send out a letter in 16 languages to sell life rafts for aeroplanes.
Life rafts for airplanes.
Yeah.
Okay.
For a firm that still makes the life rafts for airplanes. So then it was called Frankenstein Beaufort, but now it's just called Beaufort. Maybe they thought Frankenstein wasn't a good name. If you go on an aeroplane, you'll see the life rafts are made by Beaufort. Yeah. So I did this, and I also did got coverage for a new hairdressing salon.
Oh wow!
I knew nothing about what you're supposed to do. So since I knew nothing about what you're supposed to do, I did the things you're not supposed to do, and I got into it. I got to see the editor of the Manchester Evening News.
Wow!
To talk about this bloody hairdressing salon. He must have thought I was a raving man.
That's a good way of doing things.
but somehow half a page appeared, not in this paper, but in another paper about the bloody salon. But anyhow, public relations that didn't do that well, and eventually Bert called me in and said, I'm afraid this public relations hasn't really done all that well. I'm afraid I'm going to have to let you go. I'm going to have to give you the sack. And I started laughing. And he said, what are you laughing about? He said, I'm serious. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? So there's nothing I can do about it. But he said, look, it'd be a terrible shame to lose a likely young lad like you to the north, which is Manchester's in the north. And they all knew that we all wanted to go down to London and make big money, you know. So he said, I've arranged to get an interview for you with Ross Porchin, the director next door. And next door was the biggest advertising agency outside London. I got an interview, and that man gave me an interview with the creative director. And the creative director, a guy called Keith Ride, very nice man, asked me a dreadfully ill-conceived question. He just said, what's your views on advertising? And I talked to him for about 20 minutes. And he said, well, we don't actually need anyone. He said, but you seem to be very knowledgeable, so we'll give you a job.
Okay.
And
that's good.
I got a job, and after he'd seen me, another guy came in called Rufus Levin. And Rufus Levin, whom I got to know very well, was an interesting man, a former member of the Central Committee of the Communist Party.
Oops. Okay.
I have a book in my bookshop over there that he gave me 50 years ago. And he said that Keith, the guy who interviewed me, had said to him, I've just had a young man in here who knows more about advertising than I do.
Okay.
and so I started to work on big accounts. I also wrote some appallingly bad advertisements for the agency itself, which even now I feel I shudder to think about. But eventually, I'm really not a very nice person then. He came in one day and he saw me sitting there doing nothing. And he said, why aren't you doing anything? I said, well, you haven't given me anything to do. And he said, if you haven't got anything to do, come and ask for something. And I said, no, I said, it's your job to give it to me. I was completely wrong. It was he was quite right, but I got angry with him. And I decided anyhow, I wanted to go down to London and make my fortune. And I went down to London with my father and his bank manager. And I had interviews with 3 or 4 agencies, and I was offered jobs at 2 of them. And I turned them down because I thought I could get more money. And eventually I got a job. I was given a job at the agency that became the Leo Burnett agency for more than the other people had asked me. That's how I got my job in. Well, were you still asking me about, what were you asking me about now? I've got made lots of notes.
Yeah.
You haven't asked me about books, have you?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, about the books I did.
Oh, well, I was going to say some other things about books when I put this thing back in my hair again. I'm just astonished at how few books copywriters have read today. They seem to think it's something you just pick up as you go along. And as I've rather hinted, the books that have influenced me have not necessarily been anything to do with advertising. There's a nice quote from an English poet who said, I think it was may have been Rudyard Kipling. What do they of England know who only England know? And I would say, what do they of marketing know, or who only advertising know? Because the way you get great ideas is that you take 2 things that don't seem to have anything in common, and you put them together in a surprise, and people are surprised, and it fixes it in those ideas in their memory. So reading things that have nothing to do with advertising or marketing is a great idea. Otherwise, you're in this narrow little street that everyone else is following, and it's as though you don't realize you're in the middle of a big city and there are lots of other streets, lots of other ideas, lots of other thoughts that you can use if you only know about them.
Got it.
People they're just ill-informed. I read newspapers from America, from Ireland, all over the place. From Singapore, not Singapore. I don't read. I used to read the Straits Times actually.
Oh wow! Okay.
I got one of the best ideas that I was ever given, because I'd been to Singapore and I'd made a speech and I was flying to Taipei, to Taiwan, to do some training there. And while I was on the plane, I read a quote from Confucius, who said, "Men's natures are alike, which is their habits that drive them far apart." And that taught me something about my job, which was to deal with agencies all over the world, because that was, at that time, my job at Ogilvy was to help people in all our agencies, find new talent, train people, be nice to clients,
I see.
And so I learned from that. So once I'd read all I could find about great advertising, then all that was left was things that are nothing to do with advertising. So today I write 5 emails a week generally, and some other stuff.
Mm.
So I'm always looking for ideas, but I rarely find them from people in advertising or marketing. I find them from more interesting people.
Okay.
No, people in our industry are generally speaking good fun. You know, it's a fun business. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
So I've gone and taken you off track probably. So you better keep me in. You better keep me in order.
Sure. No problem. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. It's very, very, very interesting. Yeah. Got some good insights as well. So, I'm working in fundraising, like raising funds for charities, or even sometimes for people, babies who have cancer or who are not well. But on the charity side of things, what basic things do you think charities and non-profit organizations can do better in their donor communications for better long-term fundraising? This is because many of them aren't able to afford experienced copywriters or marketers.
This thing about they think they can't afford it reminds me of a remark made by the president or somebody of Harvard University a few years ago.
Okay.
And he said, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance.
Yeah.
And the problem with most charities is they're very unnaturally preoccupied with their charity. And they would be smart if they were to get a little bit preoccupied with the secrets of how to persuade people to do what you want. And because they do not know the secrets of persuading people to do what you want, they make all sorts of mistakes. The first mistake they make is they don't communicate often enough. I mean, I can only tell you that it's very, very simple. The more often you communicate, the better you do. Full stop. That's why we email our list 7 days a week. Yeah. Nobody's going to tell me that on Thursday, that's the day when they'll all be reading my stuff. Yeah.
Yep. Agree.
They'll read that. Yeah. They'll read my stuff when they choose to read my stuff.
All right. Yeah. I think a lot of them are like scared to email donors because they're afraid, the donor gets
frightened of boring them. And the answer to that is don't be a bore. If you care enough about your business, if you care enough about the children you're helping. I mean, I do write copy for charity still. Then you will find things to say. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you find them to say in a charming manner, or in the case of a charity, in an emotional, heartfelt manner that shows you care, then you won't have a problem. It's if you can't think of something to say more than once every 6 months, then there's something bloody well wrong with you. Yeah. If you are so little interested in your charity that only twice a year you should talk to people, there's something wrong with you. Go and get a job in a pub. Yeah. You're in the wrong business. Yeah. If you don't care about what you do, you won't do a good job. And if you don't care about what you do in charity, it's crazy. I do, for my part, I think a lot of charity people have become more and more corporate in the time that I've been involved in charities. I mean, I first wrote my first charity copy in 1970.
Oh, okay.
And I learned the most important lesson, and which I summed up by saying, if you can't make them cry, you won't make them buy.
Yeah, that's a good one. Got to make them cry.
Yeah, you've got to reach out to people and touch their hearts,
Correct.
And I think that as charities get larger and in some cases more political, they become more inward looking. If you look at the, doesn't apply to charity, it applies to every organization. The larger the organization becomes, the more inward looking it becomes. The more it thinks it knows what it's doing, and the less likely it is that it knows what it's doing. The people who know are the people out in the field, of course. I'm writing for about helping people in faraway countries, which is the thing that I've tended to end up doing. It's what the people in the field have to say that counts, not the people in the head office who've sitting on their fat bottoms writing memos to each other.
Yeah.
I feel strongly about that. I do. My mother used to run a charity.
Oh wow!
I'll tell you a story. I've got my notes here, and I don't look at. I always write notes and then I forget about them. I'll tell you the story about my mother.
Okay.
My mother suddenly, she was a very beautiful woman, very talented, and at some point, I don't know why, she decided to start a charity for cats, of all things. In the end, she had all sorts of animals. You know how the English are crazy about animals. Yeah. So I used to go up to see her. I'd been in London for 40 years. I was in London. Now I'm in Bristol, which is better. London's London's too, I don't know, too impersonal. Anyhow, Bristol's much more fun. I like people from Bristol. So I went up I used to go up maybe once every month and buy her a meal. And I went up to her once, and somebody came in to pick up a kitten that she'd. And when the person went, I said, "How much did they give you?" And she said, "What do you mean, did they give me? This is a charity." I said, "I know, darling, I know it's a charity. And it's taking all your money, and it's starting to take all my money. And I'd like you to remember that a charity is also a business."
Yeah. Okay.
So she said, "Oh, yeah." And so she said, and she did a number of things, actually. She started a stall on the market where she sold things. Eventually, she had a shop where she sold things. And I said, the first thing to do is when somebody comes in for an animal, get money off them. The second thing to do, said, how many people is to take the name of everybody who comes in, and take their name and address. And I said, when we've got 1,000 names and addresses, tell me, bring me up in London. I had my offices in Soho Square. And she rang me up, so I got 1,000 names. I said, okay. I said, what I want you to do now is to sit down and write a letter to all these people saying two things. Number one, terrible things are happening to cats. I think she was just doing cats then. Number two, if you don't get more money, you'll have to close down. So she went away and she wrote a letter and sent it to me. And I edited it slightly and I sent it to David Ogilvy. And I said, David, I said, this is the first letter my mother has ever written. I said, I've changed it, put in a few paragraphs, and said, but this is her copy. And he rang me up and he said, "Morning, Drayton. Hi, your mother." He and I had a great many laughs. I went to visit him at his chateau a few times, and I had quite a few meals with him, and almost every time that I saw him, I remember something interesting, maybe because I was interested in him, but he was a very interesting man. But I always remember about how your mother. So that's the trick, isn't it? You've got to care with charity.
Yeah.
And you've got to
Okay.
communicate more often. When people say, "Oh, we can't communicate more with people," I'll say, "Do you find your job interesting? Do you find your charity interesting to you? Does it interest you? I hope so.
Yeah.
If it interests you, I hope it interests you enough to write more bloody often to people." Yeah.
Yeah.
But and this is true. This is not just true of charities. There, I think any success I've enjoyed has been through having a slightly wider perspective than many people do. And one of the things that I always say to people is, if you've got a real perspective of your business, then surely you must have things that you think that matter to your customers. And your job is to sit down and think of something to say to them. I mean, that's what I do every day. I sit down and think, what can I write to my people that they will find interesting? And if you don't know what your people will find interesting, then you're in the wrong job.
I agree.
A lot of people are in the wrong job. You do realise that. A lot of people are more interested in what their boss might find interesting, the board of directors might find interesting, than they are in what their customers might find interesting. But they have to remember that the money doesn't come from your boss. It doesn't come from it comes from the customers. But I would say, I would bet that most people in business think more about their colleagues and their boss than they do about their customers. And somebody or other said, I forget who it was, I collect all these sayings, but somebody wise once, there is only one source of profit in your business, it is your customer. Actually, that was said by a very good thinker whose name escapes me, but will almost certainly come back to me as soon as this interview is finished.
No problem, no worries about that. So how do you stay curious, especially in a world that now just bombards you with all sorts of information thanks to the internet?
It's a medical condition. I quoted I think I quoted to you Dr. Johnson saying, "Curiosity is not the mode of conversation amongst gentlemen." Well, I'm just insanely curious about everything. I'll give you. It must be your little boy. Is it your little boy?
Yeah, my little
Come on,
one.
let's have a look.
Come in. Yeah, my girl,
Hello.
my daughter. She keeps me busy.
It's very interesting. We were out the other day. I have a strange setup here. I live with a couple and their daughter, whom I've known for a long time. And the other day we all went out with my daughter's best friend, who is actually a Korean boy. Very, very interesting. And and I remember that my youngest daughter, who is now about 24, and she's a singer and model and so on in Los Angeles, and one of her best friends was Korean back in and she should have stayed in contact, and she could have done K-pop with her.
Oh, K-pop, okay.
But what were we talking about? Curiosity.
Yeah, curiosity.
I'll give you an example. It's just whenever I have a thing somewhere in my head, people have measuring things inside things that measure. I think I've got a measuring thing in my head. I walk down the road. I walk a lot, a great deal, probably 4 hours a week. And down the road from me, on one of the walks that I take when I'm walking to the station, there is a guy. I think he comes from the Caribbean. I'm not sure, but he sells a magazine called The Big Issue, which is a charity magazine.
Oh, okay.
And he's there every day that I see him.
Oh.
And he says hello to everybody he meets. He must have said hello. He doesn't say hello. He just puts his fist out and bumps. You know, you bump. Yeah. So he does it to everybody. And I have him in the back of my look. I watch him. I see things and I think about things, not consciously but subconsciously. And I think I've got to do an interview with this guy. Why? Because he never gives up. He's been bumping my thing for 3 or 4 years, maybe. I've never bought The Big Issue from him. Yeah. Because although I approve of it, I don't find it all that interesting. But I will eventually. So I thought, I'm going to write something about him, and I'm going to call him Mr. Indefatigable because he never gives up. And then I'll say, this is a lesson to you, as a marketer. And did you know that on average, the first time somebody does business with you, in business to business, anyhow, is on average, about 2 years. So you better be indefatigable. Yeah, don't give up. Yeah. So when I walk along, I'm always there's a thing in the back of my mind. It's not what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about, am I going to miss the train, or you know, have I taken the wrong direction, which I frequently do. But in the back of my, and what people don't realise is that there is your brain. There's plenty of room for everybody. Yeah. Yeah. People think that, well, I'm just specialised in my own little field. Well, it's rubbish. Yeah. You never know, and it's very important because great ideas come from the element of surprise. Yeah. Let's take a letter written by somebody who worked with me at Ogilvy and Mather, which was probably, which I believe was the most profitable letter ever written. Some people think the most profitable letter ever written was for the Wall Street Journal. It was not. It was written by this guy whose name I could never remember because I can never remember anybody's name. And it began, quite frankly, the American Express card is not for everyone. And not everyone who applies is built them. That did more than commercials or anything from it. It built a huge organization, just one letter. And why did it do so well? Because everybody's used to somebody saying, buy this, buy that, blah, blah. Nobody goes along and says something surprising, like, quite frankly, this letter isn't, but you're special. It positions the card. It's positioning is a very important thing. How are you positioned as a charity, for instance? Charity I've written copy for called Flora and Fauna. All about animals and that sort of thing. They're positioned in a particular way. Save the Children, which is the first charity I wrote copy for, positioned in a particular way. I mean, the big question in every prospect's mind is, why should I choose you? And all that starts with positioning. But you can't know it, you can't understand how well to do these things unless you're interested in everything. You can't position something unless you know about the positioning of everything else. You can't position something unless you think about these things. People do not think. So I spend half the day thinking about nothing in particular. I can see you again.
That's my 2 kids.
What have you got? Oh,
Yeah,
sweet.
she's got this pocket toy. Yeah, my books will go to them one day.
Ah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so basically you just gotta stay curious
Yeah.
and learning. So sorry about that.
What do you mean? Why are you sorry?
Yeah, kids being kids.
Oh, what else should they
Yeah,
be? No, let them be
yeah,
kids as long as they can.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like what would you say are the 3 to 5 most important things you've learned about life in general? Like any stories you can share about
Blimey,
these?
it's all right. No, I'm looking to see what did I forget.
Yeah, or even just one thing is good.
I did make some notes. I always do this. I make notes and then I forget all about my bloody notes. What do I? No, I forgot. I've even forgotten what my questions were. We're still wading through me talking rubbish. What do I think? I think I quoted the proper study of mankind is man.
Mm-mm. Yeah,
I think the most important thing is to study people, to be interested in people.
Okay.
I think for me, the most important single thing you should consider is a rather terrifying fact.
Okay.
And that fact is that you only come into this world with one thing. And you only leave this world with one thing.
Oh, what's this thing?
You. That's the only thing you come in. You come in with you and you leave with you.
Okay.
So that's all you've got. You have nothing else. Yeah? Anything else you may acquire along the way or lose along the almost irrelevant. It's only you. Therefore, you should do the best you possibly can to improve yourself along the way as much as possible.
Okay.
And you can only do this if you insist on being you and not somebody else.
Okay.
Most people spend their lives copying other people. Yeah? Following the trend, doing what everyone else does. If that is so, you might just as well never have lived. Yeah?
Yeah.
So if there's you, be the best you can.
Yeah.
And not somebody
That's a very
else.
good one.
But most people in our industry, any industry, they're always copying other people. What's the point? There are plenty of them already. Yeah. Try to be one of you.
Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you.
I think it's apart from trying to be nice to people, I can't think of anything more important. Since that's all, that's your raw material. You don't have any other. You can't find it somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's just you.
Yeah.
It's and obviously try to be nice to other people. That helps.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll be nice to you.
Yeah.
I look back on my career. I don't always think I've been a wonderful human being. I think as I get older, I get slightly less unpleasant. Which is not hard. There are things I did when I was younger I'm ashamed of.
Okay.
When I got my first job as a creative director, I was a copy chief. What?
Okay.
So you asked about, there was one thing you talked about that we didn't talk about at all, which was goals.
Oh yeah, goals.
Yeah, I always wanted to get. I always had goals, and I always insisted on trying to go for more than I was offered.
Okay.
So when I first came down to London, I kept on turning down these jobs. Yeah? And when I became somehow, I still don't understand how this happened. I was approached to become the creative director, well, the copy chief of an agency, which was quite well known. I have no idea how they heard of me. And I went to see the guy, and I remember he offered me a certain amount of money.
Okay.
And this was on a Friday. He'd actually said, this is what I'll give you. And I said, well, I would like more. I asked for more. I always asked for more. Not always, but often when I was young.
Okay.
And they said, well, why don't you think about it over the weekend? And I said to him, his name was Jack Swab, very nice man. I said, Mr. Swab, why don't you think about it over the weekend? And he'd said, you know, we've had other copy chiefs here, but they haven't been able to impress their personality on the agency.
Okay.
And I said, I guarantee I will impress my personality on the agency. I said, whether the agency will like it or not is another matter. But I got the money I wanted.
Okay.
So I was quite often, as I worked earlier in Manchester, I always wanted more. Why not? You know?
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, I think that's very important.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Very, very good advice and lessons. Yeah.
So have I finished boring the pants off you, and is it your turn to?
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just don't think I was very nice. I remember that they had an art director there.
Okay.
Who was he was very talented, but not very nice.
Okay.
And he was the guy I had to impress my personality on. So what I did was I found another art director and started working with him until eventually the first art director just left.
Oh,
and
wow.
The last time I saw him, he was selling ties in a department store. And I feel ashamed. I think I should have found a way of working with him, but he wasn't very easy to work with. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So what do you have for me?
Where are my questions?
Oh.
Without her, I'm lost. I don't. My memory is shocking. I have things like I never know where I'm going or how to get there, or even why I decided to go there in the first place.
Yeah, it happens to me too.
I do remember. I wrote a series of questions for you, and Kelly said to me, "Those are stupid questions. Go away and think of some good ones."
I think no question is stupid.
Oh, here she's got them there.
Oh.
Yeah. The first thing I was curious about, because looking at, you know, how come you just decided to go into copywriting? What were you doing before that?
I think that the first time I decided to go into copywriting was in 2016. Back then I was working in a bicycle shop selling like, you know, mid to high end bicycles that can cost anywhere from $3,000 all the way to $30,000 for a bicycle.
Is this Singapore dollars? Is it?
Singapore dollars. Yeah.
What are they compared to American dollars?
about 1.5 times, like one Sing dollar is 1.5, about 1.5 US dollars. Yeah,
Oh, really?
thereabouts.
So bloody expensive bicycles.
Yeah, very, very expensive. So, so it happens that I created this website for the shop I was working for, and then the idea came to me because we also had this like e-commerce online shop section, and then I thought, if we have this thing that's online, why don't I turn a website into a 24/7 salesman, who will not fall sick, he will not take leave, he'll just be up there for people to buy stuff. So I realized, I need to know what to write to start selling stuff. So that's when I got into copywriting. And then I discovered that, if I want to do better in copywriting, I need to know marketing as well. And they kind of go very hand in hand. Yeah.
So you really started because you had to sell something. So you were in a situation where you had to sell something.
Yeah. I was in a situation where I had to sell something. So then I started going to the bookshops, looking like there's this local bookshop which is quite big. It's called Kinokuniya, and they have a section, like a huge marketing section, and all the copywriting books were there. So I remember I picked up one book which is titled Right to Sell, and then I went searching for Facebook groups, and I landed in Cult of Copy, and I discovered you there because somebody mentioned you, and then I went to Google you, and eventually I discovered Ask Drayton and all your other stuff. So that built my foundation. Your books and material built it.
I always keep on thinking of turning Ask Drayton into a course, because it's got all the stuff in there, but it's not organized in there as a course.
I think it will be very helpful for people.
But it does well. I remember reading somewhere that continuity deals like that on average last for about 4 months. That's the average length of time. But people stay with that for about 10 months, I think, on average. Some people have stayed for years and years.
Yeah,
maybe
stay for years.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me have a look at.
So
that's how you got in. You got into it because you had to sell something.
Because I had to sell something. Yeah. So then
I can't press John Locke Kelly because can I? Oh yes, I can. Yeah. What's the most important thing you've learned so far?
Wow. I guess the most important thing is I shouldn't assume like people's motivations. Like if I'm trying to sell something and I want to know what motivates them, I discovered that I cannot simply assume that this is their motivation to buy something or even to donate. So which also kind of led me to realize that I've got to be curious about people and continue being curious about them. Find out what makes them tick, find out how they think, what they like, what they say, what they talk about, or who or what they listen to.
There's a man who saved Chrysler from going broke in the 1980s or actually he became so famous that people wanted him to run for president, and I always remember I read his autobiography, which is quite boring, to be honest.
Lee Iacocca, is it?
Yeah, but he said one thing that I've never forgotten. And he said, if you want to get on here, if you want to do well, he said you better get on with people, because that's all we've got around here. I agree. It's very difficult to know why people do things. And that's I found in I've missed out a lot of my life because it just goes on and on and on, a bit like me.
Yeah.
And we were selling washing machines, and so we had to go around to people's places, flats, and talk to them about why they got washing machines. You can't beat a bit of research.
Yeah, you can't beat a bit of research.
So do you actually go out and talk to customers or not, or to donors?
I would get to talk to customers when I was in a bike shop. But for the charity side of things, I don't really get to talk to my donors, but we do get to see why they donated, because they'll leave like little statements saying, sharing why they donated. So,
but do you think they actually know why they do it? Do you think they know?
I think that's a tough question. Like, I think some of them donate because maybe they want to do good, and also they get some tax deduction from there. Some of them are just really passionate about the cause, like say cats or kittens or dogs. Yeah, some of them maybe have lost someone to, say, breast cancer, for example. So they can relate, and then they make the donation for that particular cause. Yeah.
So you don't really talk to them.
I try. I mean, I don't talk to my donors directly, like face to face, but I did have this little thing going on where I would send out emails and then try to converse with them.
Oh.
And just ask them, how are you doing? How are their lives? Especially in 2020 when COVID hit and people started losing jobs. Yeah. So I tried to have some kind of conversation or bond with them.
I would love to tell you that I take the trouble to talk to donors, and the answer is that I don't. I do take. So I'm not very good at that. So, what's the most interesting job you've worked on in the last 6 years?
Oh, the most interesting job. I think it'll probably be the sales job, and I guess it'll be my current job as well, because it's still sales, just that I'm selling different things. For the sales job, the bicycle shop job, I guess you get to see many different kinds of people, like you have like new cyclists who are coming into the hobby versus like people who do Ironman triathlons. They come from like all walks of life.
Your little girl,
yeah, my little girl.
How old is she?
She's 7 this year. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so she'll be 8 next year, in the early part of the year.
She's very funny. Very funny.
Yeah. So I think the charity one was quite interesting. Also because when I joined the Singapore Red Cross, it was my first fundraising job, and I would say zero fundraising experience, and I'm put in a position where I have nothing to sell you. I got no product, no nothing, and I have to take money off you.
That's what. That when I first started writing charity stuff, in 1970, 50 years ago. That's what I couldn't get my head around. Oh, I'm not selling you anything. I'm not giving you anything. Well,
yeah.
And it's there was one man who was who had really got it right. He worked for Oxfam and Harold Sumption, and I learned from him.
Uh-huh.
And I suddenly realised you had to touch people's hearts. Touch people's hearts and their cash will follow. Okay.
Yeah.
So oh, this is Kelly. Well, it's curious actually. It is interesting. You like our Drayton and common sense, and how exactly have they helped you?
Oh, wow. I think us Drayton and common sense. I would say it has. I think this is an understatement when I say it. But I would say that it has helped to screw my head on right, and make me realize that when I do something or I write something, it shouldn't be for myself. It should be for the customer. I should see things from the customer's perspective, or even the donor's perspective. Like make it easy for him or her to either read or to buy or to make a decision. Basically, just really screwed my head on right, and just made me put myself in the shoes of whoever I think I'm writing to or selling to.
I think that's the most important thing to get to, to be able to. There is you probably know, I've got lots of quotes, and the man who built up Sears, a Roebuck in America, which is a client of ours. I worked on that in Chicago, which has actually been destroyed by a friend of Donald Trump's, but that's another subject. But the man who built it up was a guy called Julius Rosenwald. And he once said something I've never forgotten. He said, "My ambition is to stand on both sides of the counter at once."
Wow. Okay. Stand on both sides of the counter at once.
Yeah. It's very interesting. I think you have to be schizophrenic to be very good at this game. You've got to be yourself, and also you've got to be your customer.
Yeah. That's true. That's a good one.
Apart from what other books have really impressed you?
I would say aside from your books, I would say Brian Kurtz and Eugene Schwartz. For Eugene Schwartz, it'll be I think naturally his breakthrough advertising, and then the other book he has on writing as well. For Brian Kurtz, it would be Over Deliver, because that's also when I first learned of RFM, which is recency, frequency, and monetary.
Really?
Which really, because as a charity staff back then, like we have very little manpower. I was the only guy doing online fundraising, and being aware of RFM, really helped me to focus my efforts on different segments. I would totally recommend your books, as well as Brian Kurtz and Eugene Schwartz. And maybe
I've corresponded with Brian Kurtz, but I've never met him. There are also, my problem is I'm in England, not in America. If I was in America, I'd be disgustingly rich. But what would I do with the money? What did you think was the most difficult challenge when you started out?
I think the most difficult challenge when I started out was I guess it will be trying to do too much too soon. Like you start learning all these new strategies and tactics, and you think that you should just cram everything in at once. But it comes to a point where it feels a bit too forced. Like when people read it, when people read it, it's like it doesn't feel like a human talking to another human. It feels very forced and fake.
I think this I always remember that when a lot of people, when they read your stuff, are reading it out loud to themselves in their heads.
Yeah. That's why I found out.
Yeah, that's one of the things I didn't talk about, which I think, to me has been very important, is that I dictate everything. I've even dictated my autobiography. I dictated it all. I dictate it and then I edit it.
Okay.
I think I didn't dictate Common Sense. I did dictate quite a lot of the next book, the copywriting book, the one you haven't read.
So you just read it to yourself?
I walk, the way I work is I walk along with this, but in those days with a dictaphone, and so I would walk for hours, dictating. And then it's transcribed, and then I edit it. And I once did a sort of survey just out of curiosity. How often did I edit? And I think I edit 5 times. I don't. Would you say I edit 5 times, Kelly? Would you say?
That, yeah.
Yeah, about 5 times.
5 times.
She knows more about me than I know. Actually, she knows stuff about me I don't want to know about.
Yeah, she's very good then.
She needs to be. I wouldn't like to work for me. But she's an eccentric. She's eccentric. Now the last question: why do you enjoy taking pictures of aircraft? How did you get into that?
It actually started when I shifted into my current home, because we are in a neighborhood which is very near to the military air base. So like every now and then we'll have like the F-15 Eagles taking off, and then like right outside my window they'll just make a banking turn before they go somewhere else. So before that I was actually into photography, and I had a zoom lens that I could just get in close enough to take pictures.
So it was a combination of curiosity, geography and technology.
Yeah, a combination.
No doubt we could think of some very profound thing to say about marketing that relates to geography and law. The only thing the thing I remember was this thing that I read, that men's natures are alike. It is their habits that drive them far apart. That's the
that's true.
So that's Confucius. That was the thing that I read on my way to Taiwan. And when I got to Taiwan, I was surprised to see that somebody that I had worked for in London, one of my first jobs when I was going broke, when I was started to live under a false name. I used to be a sort of a freelance creative director. I worked in this very big agency, and the creative director, this guy called Mike Savino, an American. And there I arrived, and I hadn't seen him for years. I arrived in Taipei. Good God, there was this guy that had been my boss, and I was like his boss. You know, it was really strange. Really, really strange. Life is not. So here's a great quote that I once used in a speech, which is probably a good way to end this conversation. It was from an English physicist whose name I can't remember. I only remember he was a communist. Like my friend Rufus Levin, whom I knew all those years ago, who'd been a member of the Central Committee of the Communist Party. So this chap said, life is not only queerer than we imagine, it is queerer than we can imagine.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's a long time since I was in Singapore. I used to love it there. I nearly got a job as a creative director in Singapore.
Oh, in Singapore.
Yeah.
When was that? When, like the,
1977.
oh wow.
I was doing work for J. Walter Thompson.
Uh-huh.
They asked me to go and do some work on Ford, and I wrote a complete advertising for campaign for all the Ford models sitting in a room in Germany.
Oh, in Germany.
In Frankfurt. I did it in 5 days. And then they offered me a job. They said, would you like to work for us on the Ford? And I said, not really. Frankfurt's a terrible place. And then the guy who was talking to me said, well, he said, I've got a friend who runs an agency in Singapore called Leo Burnett. And he said, they're looking for a creative director.
Okay.
So I went to, I still remember very vividly. I had to change planes in Kuala Lumpur. So I went to have a look at the caves in Kuala Lumpur and the temple. And then I arrived exhausted in Singapore. And the guy said, would you like to go to bed and rest, or would you like to go and have a drink? I said, I'll go and have a drink. So I was young then. But in those days, Singapore was not like it is now. And so he took me to Bugis Street, which
okay.
So that was my introduction to Singapore, and I didn't take the job because they offered me the job. They said, what do you can you show us what you can do? And I said, I'll write you a campaign for Singapore. And I wrote them a campaign for Singapore overnight. And they said,
for the tourism?
Yeah. And
I
think that was their account. And they offered me a job immediately. They said, but there is an art director that you have to work with. He has to agree with what and I had lunch with the art director, and then I went back and I said, I'm not having an art director tell me what to do. Sorry. And then I went back to London, and I started my own agency with 2 partners. And 2 months later, 3 months later, the guy in Singapore rang me up and said, okay, he said, you can do what you like. You've got the job. I said, too late.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's my, but I had some wonderful times in Singapore. I remember
did you visit Singapore again after that?
Oh, yeah. I used to go to Singapore a lot.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. There's somebody that I trained was the top creative director in Southeast Asia. He was in Singapore, and because my name's terrible, my memory is terrible, I just can't remember his name. He's still there.
Okay. He's still there. Wow.
Yeah, he worked for me in London, and my memory for names is terrible. He was creative director at Ogilvy there, and then he was creative director of somebody else, and then he became creative director for the region. The one agent, Saturday, and then another. But it was 3 years in a row he was voted the best creative director in Asia. But he started with me as an art director.
Oh,
and when I put the phone down, when I turn this off, I'll remember his name. He's a very, very talented young man, and I noticed he was talented. Andy, his name is Andy. Is his first name? Come to me eventually. He was an art director, but he started a little mail order business when he was with me in London. And I was interested, and I said, "Why did you do that?" And he said, I thought I'd like to know how it was to be a customer and how it was to be a client. Very, very intelligent. A very nice man too. I think the last time I was there, I had a lot of drinks with him. But yeah, I was there speaking. The time I was going to Taiwan from Singapore to Taiwan was because I was speaking at an event, and I remember the headline speaker was the minister, one of the ministers of the government, Minister for Health or something like that. Very interesting man. Yeah.
In Taiwan. Okay.
Yeah. No, this was in Singapore.
Oh, in Singapore.
Yeah, I used to go to Singapore quite a lot. Yeah, I loved it. It was a lovely place. I remember going around. I was going around the world with a girl I knew who was a singer, a Black American singer. She was very, very tall.
Okay.
And I remember going to a bar called Saxophone, which years ago, and I remember her dancing on the counter there. She was quite a sight to see.
I can imagine. Yeah. I'll have to buy you drinks when we meet.
Yeah, I had a very close friend who ran Ogilvy in Singapore, and then he went to run Ogilvy in Hong Kong.
Oh, okay.
And he died suddenly, falling down some stairs. He was he was a very, very close friend. But of course, I can't remember his name. But he was, I was very fond of him. It was a great privilege to me to have known so many people through the job I had. There are still people, a friend that I still correspond with, a friend who took me around India. David Ogilvy sent me to India. He said, I want you to go to India and teach them all about direct response. And so I went there twice. And this chap took me around. Sridhar, his name is. And I always remember some of the things that stick in your mind. I had to make a talk to the directors of Tipton's Tea or something, very, very big company there. And I'd been to a restaurant the night before or the day before, and I was doing a seminar, and I'd eaten a chicken which disagreed with me.
Oh dear.
The score was Drayton bird 0, chicken 54. And I was going to throw up. I was in a terrible state. And I had to go and talk to these gentlemen. And I got up. I was feeling sick. I did the talk. Nothing happened. And then I was ill again. And my favorite client, the cleverest man I ever worked with, apart from Ogilvy, was the chairman of the Reader's Digest in Europe, a great friend of mine. I told him this story, Victor Ross. And he said, you know, when you have a challenge like that, he said, all your bodily functions just stop while you have to do what you have to do. Very interesting. There's so many people I met in the business that were intelligent and interesting, and you know, I'm very fortunate to have ended up in that business. Anyway, I won't bore you anymore.
Yeah, no worries, not a bore. Thank you so much for having me.
Give your children my love.
Yeah, I will. Okay. Thank you so much, Drayton.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye. Yeah, he wants to say bye to you. Say bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a huge, huge pleasure.
Very lovely.
This is next.
Okay, ciao, ciao.
Okay, thank you. Huge pleasure. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Drayton.